Rosenwald Schools of Smith County, 1921 to 1931. This program was first presented to the Smith County Historical Society on December 7, 2010. A little over a year ago, I received my August 2009 issue of Southern Living magazine and found an article called "The Story of the Lost Schoolhouses" by Rex Perry. It was about the Rosenwald school buildings, which had been put on the National Trust for Historic Preservation's 2002 list of most endangered places. Rosenwald. That reminded me that I had run across the term when I was indexing the Tyler Journal newspaper from the 1920s, years ago, and I had meant to follow up on it, but it had let it drift away. The Southern Living article had a map showing where all 4,977 schools and associated buildings had been built, and there was a very dense area in East Texas, including Smith County. One of the web pages at the end took me to the National Trust website, which then sent me to Fisk University in Nashville, which had a database that I could search by county. And there were indeed 18 Rosenwald schools in Smith County, built between 1921 and 1931, and most had pictures. I'll show them to you a little later. This was all new to me, and I was hooked. As it turns out, Texas as a whole had 527 school buildings, and Bowie, Cass, and Smith counties topped the list. The story of the Rosenwald schools is fascinating. Julius Rosenwald, the Jewish Chicago-based president of Sears Roebuck Company, had read Booker T. Washington's autobiography, Up from Slavery, and he was very impressed. He viewed Washington, the well-known president of Tuskegee Institute, as another self-made man who valued industriousness and thrift. Rosenwald wrote, "Whether it is because I belong to a people who have known centuries of persecution, or whether it is because naturally I am inclined to sympathize with the oppressed, I have always felt keenly for the colored race." Through mutual acquaintances, Washington approached Rosenwald and asked him to join Tuskegee's Board of Trustees. In 1912, Rosenwald gave Washington permission to use some of the money he had donated to Tuskegee for the construction of 6 small schools in rural Alabama, which were opened in 1913 and 1914. Pleased with the results, Rosenwald then agreed to fund a larger program for schoolhouse construction based at Tuskegee. In 1917, he set up the Julius Rosenwald Fund, a Chicago-based philanthropic foundation, and in 1920, the Rosenwald Fund established an independent office for the school building program in Nashville. In 1928, 1 in every 5 rural schools for Black students was a Rosenwald school, and these schools housed 1/3 of the region's rural Black school children and teachers. At the program's conclusion in 1932, it had produced almost 5,000 new schools, 217 teachers' homes, and 163 shop buildings, constructed at a total cost of almost $28.5 million to serve over 663,000 students in 883 counties of 15 states. The program was based on the power of self-help. Rosenwald thought that philanthropies should use their grants as seed money to encourage individuals and governments to take responsibility for needed programs and services. He and the fund staff saw the building program as an incentive to Southern states to meet their responsibility for decent public schools for Black children. The fund required that their schools meet specific minimum standards for the site size, which was a 2-acre minimum, and length of school term, and have new blackboards and desks for each classroom, as well as 2 sanitary privies. African Americans had to contribute cash and in-kind donations of material and labor to at least match the Rosenwald grant. The county school board had to provide public support, take ownership of the new school property — they could no longer be on church land, for example — and commit to maintaining it as part of the public school system. Occasionally, the schools received additional contributions from white friends. After 1927, the Rosenwald Fund also subsidized low-cost school libraries, offering sets of carefully chosen works that included positive accounts of African American history and culture. After 1929, they could also purchase cut-rate Rosenwald radios in order to keep up with world events, as well as some buses for consolidated school districts where distances were too far to walk. The buy-in by the local African Americans, with the personal sacrifices of hard-earned cash, lumber, and labor, was designed to strengthen their commitment to their local rural community. In some cases, 3 in eastern Smith County and 1 in South Smith County, it led to all-black common, as opposed to independent, school districts with all-black local school boards, in which the entire per capita tax went entirely to black students. The buildings themselves became community centers with movable partitions to make large rooms where groups could hold meetings, ceremonies, or adult education classes, with a black agriculture extension agent or home demonstration agent. The facilities made them an ideal place to set up shared home canning and other projects. These schools were separate, definitely, but not equal, but at least theirs. They became part of the heart of what Thad Sitton and James Conrad have called freedom colonies, independent, self-sufficient rural black communities, refuges from the discrimination and violence of Jim Crow, often located in remote backwoods locations along county lines in river bottoms that might flood or other land unattractive to whites. In 1900, there were 72 schools for blacks in Smith County, both public and private, operating individually. 38.7% of Texas blacks 10 years of age and over, including many born in slavery, were unable to read and write. When the state reorganized the public schools that year, it brought all black schools under supervision of white school boards in independent or common school districts. That became a problem because although state tax dollars were appropriated on a straight per scholastic basis, if there were a black school and a white school in a single district with a white board, most of the money ended up at the white school, regardless of enrollment numbers. By 1910, the literacy rates had improved so that only 24.6% of county African Americans were unable to read or write, as opposed to 2.6% of the whites. White teachers' salaries per child were almost 2.5 times that of black teachers. 45.6% of all Smith County children ages 6 to 14 were black. In 1920, prior to the oil boom, Smith County was considered so poor that for every $1 in state taxes that it paid in, it got back $2.27 for free school funds, free textbooks, and special aid for rural schools. 40% of Smith County white farmers were tenants, while 60% of black farmers were tenant farmers. Black farmers generally held smaller acreages with poorer access to markets on decent roads. Still, literacy rates were going up, with only 17.8% of blacks not being able to read or write, basically defined as not being able to recognize and write their own names. The term literacy has certainly changed in definition a lot since then. 67% of all students, black and white, went to smaller common schools in the country rather than in-town independent school districts like Tyler. In the 1922-23 academic year, there were 55 black rural schools employing 78 teachers, enrolling just over 4,000 students. 82% of the teachers were women, with a median age of 27 years, considerably older than that for white women who often quit working as soon as they got married. The black teachers had on average more years of experience. However, for that year, the average salary for black teachers was only just over half of what the white teachers in rural schools made. Monthly pay for white male teachers averaged $125, white female teachers $80, black male teachers $75, and black female teachers $60. Black rural schools met an average of 108 days, while whites went to school 131 days. If you look to the minutes of the Smith County School Board in 1926, you will see one reason. They suggested that the black schools start on the first Monday in November, the late season being assigned as the reason for deferring the opening of the colored schools in order to allow the children to help with the cotton harvest. Rural white schools might also start later than town schools. Their terms ranged from 6 to 9 months, while town schools went 9. As years went by, the school terms would get longer in the country schools. This was the situation in Smith County in the early 1920s, leading up to the construction of the first Rosenwald schools. As Henry Edwards wrote in the Tyler Journal in 1927, "Education for the colored race will do as much for them as it will for the white race. And the time is past when well-informed white people held the view that the Negro's education is a matter that may be neglected with impunity. It cannot be." Robert S. Bolter, county school superintendent, agreed. County school records are sparse, especially for the country schools. But by at least 1923, Bolter was addressing the Smith County Colored Teachers Institute meeting at True-Vine Baptist Church about how to secure help from the Rosenwald Fund. And the next year, the Institute offered him a rising vote of thanks for building 8 African-American schoolhouses during his term of office. By 1925, another had been added, with more to come. At this point, I would like to turn to the community school plans, as the building designs were known. This is a one-room school. They were very practical and scientifically thought out, modest, cost-conscious, open, bright, orderly, and clean. All were initially frame construction. Here's a 2-room school with tall windows on one side of the classroom, providing a single stream of light falling from left to right to illuminate a blackboard and desks. After all, being rural schools, most did not have electricity. 3-room classroom with a community room. Breeze windows provided cross ventilation between rooms. They usually had dark wainscoting with buff painted walls and light cream ceilings with light tan and translucent window shades. Blackboards were on 3 walls with modern patent desks, not crude benches. When white school officials wanted to shortchange on the furniture, the Rosenwald Fund refused to make final payment unless all standards were met. The fund was also concerned with clean drinking water, sanitary outhouses, and playgrounds, as well as with landscaping, recommending flowering plants, fences, and lawns. There's a shop plan, a privy, and a teacher's house. The fund gave these plans away free to the state departments of education and local school boards. So if they look familiar, you may not be looking at a Rosenwald school. It's an interesting situation where the black schools sometimes led the way. Since this is the 1920s in the South, when the Ku Klux Klan was reborn and growing, you've just got to wonder what they thought when a Jewish Yankee gave money to Southern blacks to build schools better than where some of their own children went. So, where were the Rosenwald schools in Smith County? Here's a map from a master's thesis done in 1935-36, which shows all of the rural school districts. I'm going to be showing you sections of this map paired with photos from the FIST database. Some of the photos are clear, some are not, but they will give you a good idea. As Also, most of the photos were taken as the school was finished, and then the map is from 10 years later. I think some may have had additions built by then. 3 schools were built during the 1921-1922 funding year. This is Black Fork, which is west of Tyler. It had 2 teachers. The community raised $900 and Rosenwald gave $800. It later consolidated with Dixie. Buttrick Wallace is in the FISC database without a photo and is not on the school map, at least under that name. I think it may be the Starville Black School, but I'm not sure. Wallace Buttrick was the president of the General Education Fund in the Rockefeller Center. Other sources for funding for African American schools, so it may have been a temporary honorary name. For this school, blacks raised $600, whites matched that, and Rosenwald kicked in $800. This is Jamestown School, which was in the far east Smith County line and was one of the all African American school districts in an area that the editor of the Tyler Journal in the 20s called the Black Belt of Smith County. So it's way over next to Russ County, and there's the school. From one side, it's still under construction, and from a different side. Jamestown has been designated as a freedom colony. The citizens here voted an extra school tax, and the land came from El Bethel. The community raised $700, and Rosenwald gave $800. There were 4 schools built in 1923-24. Bullard, or Stanton, was another all-black district and a high school with territory that went over into Cherokee County. This is their old school. It's a fuzzy photograph, but you get the idea. The black community raised $700, Rosenwald gave $900, and local whites gave $400. And this is their new school. Stanton School later moved just east of Highway 69 and finally consolidated with White House. Rabbit School was also on the Russ County line below Jamestown on Rabbit Creek. It was another all-black school district and had 2 teachers. Community contributed $300 and Rosenwald gave $700. So that was their old school, and this is their new school. White House School, both of these photos are here, so it's where White House is now. And here's the old school and the new school. Both of these are poor photographs. 3 teachers, and the community raised $1,000. Local whites contributed $300, and Rosenwald gave $900. Winona School already had 1 acre used for a school. And so the New Zion Colored Baptist Church gave another 1.5 acres to get enough land. The community also raised $500. Local whites gave $800, and Rosenwald gave $700 for a 2-teacher school. Only 1 school was built in 1924, 25, and none the year after that. Waters Bluff is between Starville and the Sabine River, and it has also been identified as a freedom colony. Here is their old school. The community raised $600, local whites contributed $400, and Rosenwald gave $700 for a 2-teacher school. So this is their new school from one direction and from another direction. While the original school burned down not long after construction, the replacement school is still standing and follows the community school plans. So this is what it looks like now. Front door. From the back, that's the well with a board over it. And what it looks like on the inside. Only 1 school was built the next year, but it was the most important one. Jackson School became the black rural high school for eastern Smith County, formed by the consolidation of Piney Grove, Black Chapel Hill, and Coal Hill schools. there is a wonderful dissertation that Dr. Peggy Gill at UT Tyler did on the history of Jackson based on interviews that she did. It's called Since We Bought the Land, Stories of Community in Relation to Schools, and she did it at Stephen F. Austin in 2000. Robert Bolter, County School District Superintendent at the time, also wrote about Jackson in his reminiscences published in Chronicles. The time was right, the place was right, and the right people were on hand to be involved in one of the boldest, most significant advancements in the field of education for rural Black children ever to be made in Smith County, the establishment of Jackson High School for Black children. Having had the opportunity as county school superintendent of visiting many schools and witnessing the wide discrepancy in education as between white and Black children, I felt deeply that it was my responsibility to establish a first-class high school for the Black children. To do this, we needed to find a district with only a few white students and some 200 or more Black students, a district strategically located as to attract students from other areas. So they closed Browning White School and bused those students to Holt. Then they consolidated the 3 Black schools, voted a $1 school tax, and a $3,000 bond issue. They bought 20 acres for $500. The Rosenwald Foundation gave them $1,400 for a 4-teacher school building, and Carl Shank, who ran a lumber yard in Winona, sold the building materials at cost. And this was their new school. There's one angle and then the other direction. Rosenwald also came back and helped fund a shop building. Jackson became a county training school with special funding from the Slater Fund, which provided money for vocational agriculture and home economics for both school-age children and adults. Mrs. M.N. Biggs was hired as the Jeans teacher from a program funded by a Philadelphia Quaker woman to serve as a teacher trainer and community organizer. Jackson later consolidated with Chapel Hill, which later integrated, and now the school site is used by Jackson Middle School. 2 schools were built the next year. Douglas School, named for Frederick Douglass, was another all-Black district in eastern Smith County, another identified freedom colony. This is their old building. The local community raised $1,400, and Rosenwald contributed $700 to this 3-teacher school. This is their new school. Troop School is different. It was funded as a 3-teacher frame school, but according to the 1927 newspapers, it burned because of a defective flue in the ceiling. This is their new building. This looks like perhaps its replacement because it is brick. Also, the FISC database lists an $8,400 total school cost, with Rosenwald giving $700, but no community contribution. It may just be incomplete information. There's one side, there's another side of Troop School. One school was built the next year, and it's another one that I can't find on any map or local list. Does anybody know anything about Langley School? There were 2 Black Langley heads of household in the 1920 census in the Troop area, but I don't know if that is significant. So there's their school one view, and this is a really bad photograph of another view of Langley. Antioch School was east of Lindale, and we don't have any photos of it. It was a 3-teacher school. The community raised $800, and Rosenwald gave $700. ARP School was originally a 2-teacher school. There's one view and another fuzzy view. The community raised $800, local whites gave $250, and Rosenwald contributed $500. When the oil boom hit, it quickly expanded to a high school. Center School was between Winona and the current health center. Here's their new school, one side, and a fuzzy one of the back side. It was a two-teacher school. The community raised $600 and Rosenwald gave $500. Midway was between St. Louis and Rice, southwest of Tyler. Their photograph there is Midway and their new school. Midway was a four-teacher school with the community raising $3,000 and Rosenwald giving $1,100. Midway consolidated with Rice District around 1942. Mount Zion is another question mark. The FISC database shows Mount Zion, local records mention at Dunbar, and Dunbar community is identified as being at the same place as Mount Zion Church and Cemetery in far eastern Smith County, yet neither shows up on the thesis map. The last, and there's Mount Zion there. The last Rosenwald school built in Smith County was Clayton, built in the 1930-1931 funding year, which has gotten some attention recently at a University Woods meeting. And it also had a UT Tyler cultural anthropology class this semester looking at the community. Clayton School was located on the Old Troop Highway, about where the back drive of Super 1 is, on the opposite side of the tracks from the Baptist Church on Callaway Road. Unfortunately, we don't have a photo of that one either. It was a two-room school with the community raising $1,650 and Rosenwald giving $400. By 1938, it was almost all secondary students. By 1930, the illiteracy rate among Smith County blacks over the age of 10 was down to 15.6%. By 1939, more of the schools had consolidated in order to offer a better education to their students. 4 of the black common school districts had moved up to a standard 9-month terms. By 1945, most of the old common school districts had consolidated into independent school districts, and many of the old Rosenwald buildings had been abandoned. While there were still all-black schools, there were no more all-black school districts with all-black school boards. Then, by the late 1960s and early 1970s, Smith County schools started integrating individual schools. As far as we can tell, there's only the one Rosenwald-era school left in the county at Walters Bluff, and what is there now is a replacement. The lumber yard hardware giant company Lowe's has given grants to renovate 5 Rosenwald schools just here in Texas, in Calvert, Linden, Beeville, West Columbia, and Dayton. Ted Law of Dallas, recent president of the East Texas Historical Association, is writing a book on the history of the Rosenwald schools of Texas. His wife's father taught at Sand Flat Rosenwald School in Rains County, and they are working to get it restored. If anyone has any information or photos or mementos of school days at any of these Smith County locations, I'm sure we would both be glad to hear about it. Each of these Rosenwald schools was at the heart of communities that are now fading as children move away for more opportunities, but it would be a shame to let them totally disappear without a trace.